1981, Federal Court, New York. A man is sitting at the witness stand, Jimmy Fratianno. For 30 years, he had followed a single rule: never speak. But today, he was going to break that rule. 67 years old, of average height, gray hair, thick hands, tired eyes. His voice was flat, low, monotonous. The prosecutor next to him placed his files on the table. The man looked ahead. He waited. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, FBI agents, prosecutors. And a few rows back at the defendant's table, an elderly man, the head of one of New York's most established families, 83 years old, his hands on the table, flat, his gaze fixed on a point ahead. The elderly man wasn't looking at the witness, nor was the witness looking at the old man. Both of them knew this. A glance was a language. Language was dangerous. One stayed away from danger. This was a learned reflex. It had become second nature over the years. The prosecutor spoke. "Your name, Aladena Fratianno. But no one calls me that. They call me Jimmy. How long have you known the defendant? A long time. Can you tell us about it?" The man didn't hesitate. He had already thought it all through, night after night, week after week. The words were waiting for their turn. He told his story. And in the courtroom, as the old man's gaze tried to pierce the wall, things known for years but never spoken came out word by word. They were recorded in the court records. They became permanent. Jimmy Fratianno spoke a lot that day. He had never spoken so much in his life. 1913, Naples, then Cleveland. Aladena James. Fratianno was put on a ship with his family when he was just a few months old. He wasn't old enough to understand. He learned from what was told later. His father had gone first. He'd found work, written a letter. His mother and child followed. Little Italy, Cleveland's east side, narrow streets, multi-story wooden buildings, Italian-speaking neighbors, church on Sundays, the factory during the week, a constant smell, food, sweat, soap, and something else, something nameless. His father worked every day. According to his mother, he was a good man, tough but fair. As Jimmy grew up, he understood this better. Toughness and fairness were inseparable in that neighborhood. As life got tougher, people got tougher too. This wasn't a complaint, just an observation. Jimmy went to school. He didn't go much. His mind was always elsewhere. He watched certain men in the neighborhood, the ones who didn't go to the factory, the ones who didn't come home tired at night. Their walk was different. They carried their shoulders in a certain way. When they spoke, everyone fell silent and listened. Even the children could sense it. It wasn't their strength. It was their silence. People feared the man who didn't speak because they couldn't know what he was thinking. The unknown was frightening. Jimmy saw this early on, very early. While the other kids played, he watched the corners. Who was giving what to whom? Who was asking what from whom? How power shifted hands. At 14, there was a small escape, a minor crime, a cop, a narrow street. He ran. They called him Weasel behind his back, like a weasel, fast, slippery, capable of vanishing. The nickname stuck. No one said it to his face, but everyone knew. Jimmy knew too. It didn't bother him. Running away wasn't a crime. Not getting caught was a skill. Few saw that difference. At 17, Johnny Martin called him. A casino, late at night. "Sit down," he said. Jimmy sat down. Martin sized him up. Jimmy would see that look many times in the years to come. Is he useful? Is he smart? Does he panic? Then he spoke briefly. Jimmy listened. He Agreed. That night on his way home, he had money in his pocket. Not much, but it was his. He didn't question it because he saw nothing to question. On one side was the factory, on the other this. It wasn't a choice. It was a calculation, a comparison of two outcomes. On those streets of Cleveland that night, Jimmy Fratianno stepped into something. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he already sensed how it was. You'll speak little. You'll watch a lot. You won't draw attention to yourself. No one had taught him this. He'd seen it. He'd absorbed it from those quiet men in the neighborhood. Things absorbed were far more lasting than things taught. Jimmy was 25 years old. Federal prison, robbery, 2 states, 3 charges. The court sentenced him to 8 years. Jimmy didn't object. He looked at the judge. He looked at the jury. Then he looked ahead. 8 years. As he lay in his cell that first night, he thought. He wondered what had gone wrong. The plan had been good. The crew was good. But something had happened. Someone had spoken up. A small word. The wrong place. The wrong ear. The wrong moment. From that night on, something changed inside him. He spoke even less. Only when necessary. Only as much as necessary. No unnecessary words, no unnecessary emotions, no unnecessary information. He spent 2 years inside. He was released early. Good behavior. When he was released, he didn't return to Cleveland. Los Angeles, sun, wide streets, palm trees, and Italians. Italians everywhere. Different families, different order, but the same rules. Jimmy watched. He watched the city. He understood who was connected to whom, who was strong, who was weak, who was trustworthy, who wasn't. Then he found his place. Jack Dragna, founder of the Los Angeles family. Old school, calm, powerful. A name rarely heard, but whose influence was deeply felt. Jimmy approached. He approached slowly. He couldn't rush. Those who rush make mistakes. Those who make mistakes draw attention. Those who draw attention put themselves in danger. In 1947, he took the oath, made man. The ceremony was simple, a small room, a few men, fire, burning paper, words. This family, they'd said, this blood. Jimmy listened. He nodded. Then he thought. Family. It was a nice word, but families rotted too. Always from the inside. Not from the outside. From the inside. That thought came to him that day. It stayed with him for a long time. He rose quickly in Los Angeles. Because he worked. Because he thought. Because he didn't talk unnecessarily, and because he didn't hesitate to act when necessary. To do what? That question wasn't asked. Jimmy didn't answer. It shouldn't have been asked anyway. That was omerta. To know without saying, to understand without asking, and to remain silent after understanding. As the city grew, Jimmy grew. Money grew, fame grew, respect grew. But his stature remained small. It always remained small. Average height, plain clothes. In a dimly lit bar, no one would give him a second glance. This was intentional. The man who looked ordinary was the safest man. The man least likely to be targeted. The man who lived the longest. No one had taught him this. He had seen it himself. He had understood it himself. 1957. The Appalachian meeting. Families from all over the country gathered at a farm. In New York, they thought no one knew. The police arrived. They surrounded the place. Panic. Escape. The men were in the woods. Jimmy was in Los Angeles that day. He hadn't gone to the meeting. It wasn't luck. Jimmy didn't trust big gatherings. Too many people, too much information, too much risk. A single informant was enough, and there were always informants. After Appalachian, Jimmy realized something. This world was changing. In a changing world, the only ones who survived were those who could see the change. He didn't tell anyone. He just thought about it. And he carried on. Jimmy was 34 years old. Federal prison, Ohio, robbery, 2 states, 3 charges. The court sentenced him to 8 years. Jimmy didn't object. He looked at the judge, he looked at the jury, then he looked ahead. 8 years. That first night in the cell, he thought. He thought about what had gone wrong. The plan was good, the crew was good. But something had happened. Someone had spoken, a small word. The wrong place, the wrong ear, the wrong moment. From that night on, something changed. He spoke even less. Only when necessary. Only as much as necessary. No unnecessary words, no unnecessary emotions, no unnecessary information. 2 years later, he was released early. Good behavior. When he was released, he didn't return to Cleveland. He went to Los Angeles, sun, wide streets, and Italians everywhere. Different families, different order, but the same rules, the same silence. Jimmy watched the city. He understood who was connected to whom, who was strong, who was weak, who was trustworthy, who wasn't. Then he found his place. He approached slowly. He couldn't rush. Those who rushed made mistakes. Those who made mistakes drew attention. Those who drew attention put themselves in danger. In 1947, he took the oath. The ceremony was simple. A small room, a few men burning paper, words, this family, this blood. Jimmy listened. He nodded. Then he thought. Family, it was a nice word, but families rotted too. They always rotted from the inside. That thought entered his mind that day. It stayed with him for a long time. He rose quickly in Los Angeles because he worked, because he thought, because he didn't talk unnecessarily. As the city grew, Jimmy grew, money grew, fame grew, respect grew. But his stature remained small. It always stayed small. Average height, plain clothes. In a dimly lit bar, no one would look at him twice. This was intentional. The man who looked ordinary was the safest man, the man who was the least of a target, the man who lived the longest. 1975. Dominic Brooklier went to prison. The Los Angeles family was left leaderless. A temporary leader was needed. Names were mentioned. The men sitting in the room looked at one another. Jimmy Fratianno stepped forward. Acting boss. Interim leader. Jimmy accepted. A 30-year rise. From Cleveland. From the narrow streets. From Johnny Martin's casino. Now here. But he didn't celebrate the victory. There was nothing to celebrate. He'd accepted it. For the job. There was plenty of work to do. The Los Angeles family was considered weak. That's what people on the East Coast thought. New York was powerful. Chicago was powerful. Los Angeles was scattered. It was small. Jimmy wanted to change that. He traveled from city to city. He met people. He revived old connections. He forged new ones. He worked with Chicago. He worked with New York. He used Cleveland. He knocked on every door. And every door opened. Because they knew Jimmy. They knew his name. They knew what he was capable of. Money flowed. Los Angeles grew stronger. One evening, a man asked, in the corner of the bar, in a low voice, "Jimmy, how do you do it? You've been in this life for 20 years. You're still standing. You're still free. What's your secret?" Jimmy looked at his glass. "There's no secret," he said. "Just a rule." "What rule?" "Talk little. Think a lot. Never trust." He looked at the man. "Everyone?" "Everyone." The man fell silent. Jimmy added, "Trust is a weakness. In this world, weakness kills. The man you trust will sell you out. Always. You just don't know when." The man didn't ask again. Jimmy didn't say it again either. But he thought. He thought about his own rule. And he realized something. For 20 years, he'd applied that rule to everyone. To everyone. But who had applied it to him? He knew the answer. No one. That thought was small. It was quiet, but it settled somewhere. It didn't go away. Then Brooklier got out of prison, 1976. He came back. He wanted his seat. Jimmy handed it over, but something had changed. Brooklier wasn't at ease. Jimmy had grown too powerful. He'd become too well known. He'd made too many connections. That was dangerous. A powerful man was dangerous, even to his own family. Jimmy sensed it. Unspoken things, glances, something shifting at meetings. A small thing, but Jimmy read the small things. He always did. This time, what he read was about himself, and what he read unsettled him. It unsettled him deeply. 1977, Los Angeles. Brooklier called a meeting. Jimmy was summoned. A small room, a few men, familiar faces. Brooklier spoke. He didn't speak directly. No one ever spoke directly in those rooms. But the message was clear. Jimmy was traveling a lot. He was making a lot of connections. He was becoming a well-known figure. That wasn't good. Jimmy listened. He nodded. He didn't say a word. When he got home, he thought. He thought for a long time. Brooklier wanted to take him out. He knew it. He felt it. In this world, feeling was knowing. There was no difference between the two. He'd applied this to others for 30 years. See the man gaining power. Take him out before he becomes a threat. That was the rule, that was the logic. Now the rule was being applied to him. And Jimmy realized this. He wasn't safe within this family. He had never been safe. He just hadn't noticed. Or hadn't wanted to notice. Not noticing was also a choice. Sometimes the most dangerous choice. Then the Frank Bompensiero incident happened. Bompensiero was an old friend for years, a good guy, or so everyone thought. Brooklier said something to Jimmy, in a low voice, about Bompensiero. He was working with the FBI. He was a snitch. We need to take care of him. Jimmy stayed silent. He thought about his friend. He thought about the years. Then he thought about other things. If Bompensiero was a snitch, the FBI knew everything. If the FBI knew everything, Jimmy's file must be full by now. The charges were ready. They were just waiting for the right time. And Brooklier was telling him this. Why was he telling him? He had to ask that question. Jimmy didn't sleep that night. He sat up until morning. He thought. Brooklier wanted to use him. Bompensiero wanted him to do the job. What would happen next? Then Jimmy would have done the job. Brooklier would know. The FBI would know. And Jimmy would be in the hands of both sides. It was a trap. 30 years in this world. 30 years of setting traps. 30 years of escaping traps. This time, the walls were all around him. February 1977. Bompensiero was killed. Jimmy hadn't done it. Someone else had. But the charges had come. The Danny Green murder, Cleveland. Ray Ferrito had been arrested. He was testifying. He was naming names. Jimmy's name was coming up too. Federal charges. Murder. Serious. At the same time, the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office was applying pressure. There was a case in Los Angeles too. It was coming from all sides. Jimmy did the math. A cold calculation, unfeeling. On one side was prison, a long prison sentence. Maybe life, maybe multiple charges, maybe dying inside. On the other side was something else, talking. For 30 years he'd looked down on those who talked. Weak men, he'd said, broken men, those who broke the code of silence. Now he was standing at that threshold, himself. Was this weakness, or was it another calculation? November 1977, Jimmy went to the FBI. He didn't tell anyone, not even his wife, quietly, alone. He sat down at the table, agents across from him. "I'm going to talk," he said. The agents looked at each other. No one was expecting this. The acting boss, the highest-ranking informant in history. No one that high up had ever come forward. "I have conditions," Jimmy added. "We're listening." Jimmy stated his conditions. Short, clear. No unnecessary words. A 30-year habit. It hadn't changed. Only the other side of the table had changed. 1978. Winter. Los Angeles. Jimmy was 64 years old. He got up early every morning. It was a habit. It never changed. Coffee, the newspaper, the street outside the window. Los Angeles was waking up. Palm trees, wide avenues. The sun rose from the same place every morning. Everything was the same. Nothing was the same. A deal had been struck with the FBI. Witness protection program. New identity. New city. New life. In exchange for everything. Names, dates, places, murders. 30 years of memories. Jimmy had given it all. He had given everything. The initial interrogations dragged on, for days on end. A small room, agents, recording devices, questions, answers, more questions. Jimmy spoke. He spoke calmly. He spoke emotionlessly, as if he were recounting someone else's life, as if he were reading from a book. The agents took notes. They recorded. Sometimes they paused and asked, "Are you sure? Is the date correct? Is the name correct?" Was Jimmy sure? It had been 30 years. He remembered everything. He remembered the names. He remembered the faces. He remembered the room. He remembered the smell of the air. Some things couldn't be erased, especially the ones you wanted to erase. His wife, John, was there with him. He'd met her at the airport in 1966 by chance. She was a young woman back then. She was 32. Jimmy was 53. They got married in 1975. Jean knew everything. Or maybe she didn't. That difference between the two was very important in this world. She hadn't asked. She hadn't wanted to know. Jimmy appreciated that. A person who didn't ask was a trustworthy person. A trustworthy person was valuable. Now they were going together. To another city, under another name, to another life. Jean packed their bags, quietly. Jimmy watched her. He wanted to ask something. He didn't ask. Some questions didn't require an answer. The first city was Phoenix. A small house, a quiet neighborhood, white picket fences. The neighbors were polite. They'd say, "Good morning" in the morning. "See you later" in the evening. No one asked. "Where did you come from? Who are you?" Jimmy didn't ask either. His name wasn't Jimmy Fratianno anymore. It was another name, a different name on paper, but the same face in the mirror. The first few months were hard, normal life. He'd wake up in the morning, drink coffee, read the newspaper. Jean would go shopping. They'd eat dinner in the evening, watch TV, go to sleep, then again. The same morning, the same coffee, the same newspaper. Jimmy couldn't get used to this life. He'd lived differently for 30 years. Every morning was different. Every day brought something new. There was danger, there was risk, there was a plan. Now there was only coffee. The trials began. Jimmy traveled from city to city, New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Kansas. City, a different case in every city. In every case, Jimmy was on the witness stand. Frank Thierry, New York, head of the Genovese family. Jimmy testified. Thierry was convicted. Carmine Persico, the Colombo family. Jimmy testified. Conviction. Joseph Ayupa, Chicago. Jimmy testified. Conviction. Fat Tony Salerno. Jimmy testified. Conviction. The names went on. The convictions went on. Jimmy sat in the same chair every time. He used the same voice, flat, low, monotonous. Those sitting across from him looked at him, some with anger, some with astonishment, some with something else. Jimmy didn't look at them. That was the price of the job. He had accepted the price. One evening, Jean asked, at the table. After dinner, she was staring at her glass. "Are you sorry?" Jimmy thought. "I don't know what I'd be sorry for," he said. Jean looked up. "For what you did, or for what you said?" Jimmy didn't answer. Jean didn't wait. They both knew some questions weren't asked for answers. They just had to be spoken. It went on for months. Court, hotel, court, another city, another hotel, another court. The FBI was always by his side. Protection, an agent. There was always someone nearby. Jimmy never got used to it. For 30 years, he'd protected himself. He'd made his own decisions. He'd made his own moves. Now others were making the decisions, where he'd stay, when he'd go out, who could see him. This was a different kind of prison. The walls weren't visible, but they were there. 1980. The trials were over. The program officially ended. Federal payments were cut off. Jimmy was no longer needed. "It's over," said the agent. "Thank you." Jimmy looked at him. Was that all? The agent closed the file. He stood up. He left. Jimmy sat at the table. He sat there for a long time. 30 years in this world. Finally, he was sitting in the place of the men he'd put away. What now? A new name, a new city, Jian, and a world out there. In that world, there were still men. Men who knew his name. Men who knew why they knew it. These men hadn't forgotten. They never would. Jimmy knew that. He'd known it 30 years ago, too. 1987. Phoenix. Jimmy was 73 years old. He got up in the morning. He made coffee. There was no newspaper that day. He hadn't gone to the store. Jean was in bed, sick. It was nothing serious. It would pass. Jimmy looked out the window. The neighborhood was waking up. A neighbor was getting into his car. He was going to work. The woman across the street was walking her dog. Same time every morning. Same route every morning. Ordinary life. Jimmy still hadn't gotten used to it. A book had come out that year. The Last Mafioso. It was Jimmy's story. A journalist had written it. Long interviews, long conversations. It had started years ago. Now it was on the shelves. He read it. Some parts were wrong. Some quotes had been fabricated. Later, he sued the author. He demanded money. He didn't get it. But the book had sold. It sold well. And Jimmy Fratianno was no longer just a name. He was a story, a character. The Weasel, the Last Mafioso. Newspaper interviews came. TV shows came. Everyone was curious. Who was this man? Why had he spoken out? Was he still alive? Jimmy opened the door to some. He didn't open it to others. He was choosing. He was still choosing. That habit hadn't gone away. One morning the phone rang, an unknown number. Jimmy looked at it. He didn't answer. It rang again. He didn't answer. On the third ring, he answered. The voice was familiar, an old voice, a voice from a bygone world. "Jimmy, is that you? Who is this?" "It doesn't matter, just know this. We haven't forgotten." The line went dead. Jimmy put the phone down on the table. He looked at his coffee. It had gone cold. It wasn't the first threat. They had come over the years, letters, phone calls. Once her car had been scratched. Once when Jean returned home, the door was open. No one was inside. But she had sensed something. The FBI would be notified. Security measures would be taken. Then it would pass. But it wasn't really passing. In this world, threats never ended. They just went quiet. They waited. And those who waited were patient, very patient. Jimmy knew this better than anyone because he too was a man who had waited. Jean's health began to decline, slowly, unnoticed. Then it accelerated. The doctors talked. treatment, hospital, medications. Jimmy went every day, sat by her side every day. He spoke little. Jean spoke even less. One evening, Jean asked, "Do you regret it?" Jimmy looked at her. He had asked the same question years ago, the same question. This time, Jimmy thought. He really thought. He thought about his life. He thought about Cleveland. He thought about Johnny Martin's casino. He thought about Los Angeles. He thought about Dragna. He thought about the night he took the oath. He thought about the burning paper, this family, this blood. Then he thought about the court corridors. His old friends sitting across from him, their gazes, their anger. Then he thought about this room, this silence. "Jean, I don't know," he said. Jean turned her head. She looked out the window. "I don't know either," she said. They both fell silent. They were silent for a long time. 1991. The second book came out, Vengeance is Mine. This time, Jimmy didn't sue the author, because the book was more accurate. It was closer to the truth. Or maybe Jimmy just didn't have the energy left to sue. The federal program had cut off his payments years ago. He was living on his pension. Jean was gone. His home had shrunk. Life had shrunk. But he was still standing. That was important. Maybe that was the only thing that mattered. The newspaper found him one day. A young reporter. He wanted to ask innocent questions. "Do you feel any regret? What would you change? What do you think today?" Jimmy looked at him. He was a young man, a clean face, clean hands. He didn't know this world. He was looking in from the outside. Those who look in from the outside always see things wrong. "I wouldn't change a thing," Jimmy said. The reporter was surprised. "Really?" Jimmy thought. Then he corrected himself. "I would change one thing. I would have ended it sooner." The reporter took notes. He'd probably misunderstood, or maybe he'd understood correctly. It didn't matter. Jimmy stood up. The interview was over. June 1993. Jimmy woke up in bed. Morning. The sun was streaming in through the window. It wasn't Los Angeles anymore. It was another city, a small city. The name didn't matter. He wanted to get up. He looked at his body. He was 80 years old. His body was telling him so. Every part of him was telling him so. Alzheimer's had begun years ago. It came slowly. Then it sped up. Some names were gone, some dates were gone, some faces were gone, but some remained. It wasn't the ones who left that were hard. It was the ones who stayed. He slept that day. He slept for a long time. He never woke up again. The newspapers ran brief obituaries. Jimmy the Weasel had passed away. He was 79. Natural causes, complications from Alzheimer's. Some wrote that he was one of history's most important informants. Dozens of convictions. The downfall of the West Side mob. Others wrote different things. Betrayal, omerta, loyalty. The funeral was small. Who came? How many people came? No one knew. Most of the men he had sent to prison had died there. Some had already been released, old, sick. No one recognized them anymore. The criminal underworld had changed. There were new names, new families, new rules. Fewer people remembered Jimmy Fratianno. Fewer every year. What was left? One question remained. Jimmy Fratianno had broken the code of silence. He had named names. Convictions followed. But he never apologized. He never said he was sorry. He never said he was wrong. He never said he was right. He just survived. So the question was this. What really breaks when omerta is broken? Was it a rule? Was it an oath? Was it an order? Or was it just a man? And that man was gone. The criminal underworld carried on. Other men came. Other oaths were sworn. Other silences were established. Omerta hadn't ended with one person. It hadn't even begun with one person. Jimmy Fratianno came and went. Weasel, the last mafioso. The streets remained. The rules remained. The silence remained. And one day, someone else took that seat. He gave new names. New sentences were handed down. Omerta hadn't been broken. It had simply changed hands. Again, and again, and again.